Unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words.
One of the things in terms of the architecture of the room that we did mention was this altar over here, which most of you know, but some of you might not, is a memorial and also a well-being altar. If there anyone that you want to honor, because you may be grieving their loss, certainly put their names there, or someone that you're concerned about who needs our, well wishes and prayers, also put their name there, and we'll make plenty of room. I want to say that some of you, a few of you, know the entrusted teacher in Madison, Suzanne Kilbess. She's a member of Lay City Teachers Association, but I don't think you probably met her yet. She has a leukemic condition herself and is struggling, but her husband was diagnosed with bladder cancer just a month or two ago. And things progressed quickly. He died yesterday morning at 10:30. With all the family together in hospice, it was a peaceful passing, but it's very, very quick. And so her name will be on the altar. It's Steve and her family, and I talked to her yesterday, and she thanked me and thanked all of you for holding them as they move into this new and difficult time with their family. And in some ways, I think it's for me and my long relationship with her as the teacher who trusted her. I've known she and Steve since the very beginning when I began to come to Madison 17 years ago, I think. I want to dedicate this retreat to them. That's okay. All of you, and some of you, at least many of you, and certainly our team of leaders in the Sangha, decided on some focus for the retreat, a topic, a theme. And the title that we ended up landing on was the Koan of your life. I'll talk some about classical koans, but the stories and questions that come in one's life. The subtitle is Living Encounters and Awakening Today, not just the old stories. And I think that, of course, illness, old age, and death is the foundational turn that took Siddhartha Gautama to his practice, such that he awakened to be the Buddha, whose teachings, much of what we practice are built. I'll also confess that it's also one of the reasons why I recommended that we have such a full and somewhat more formal service, including the piece that is entitled the Ehe Kosu Hatsugonmon, which I love that name. I like saying it. This is the personal vow that Dogen Zenji wrote for himself. And it's kind of old-fashioned in some ways. It's a deep thing. So whether or not you understand, accord with, are drawn to, or feel irritation by any of these things in the service itself becomes a koan. Like what is this? And what's being offered? How am I moved or unmoved by this thing that I'm offering myself to, because that's what we're doing together. And I'll go back to some of the content of those things as we move along through these next few days. But first, it's useful just to offer ourselves to it. Like most of the koans, we're confronted with the story, or we're immersed in a particular question, and we notice what comes up. One thing you might have noticed if you examine the schedule is that it doesn't look like the retreats we've done in the past in certain ways. Have you noticed? Anybody notice? Sometimes we don't notice, you just show up and do what we do. Here's what I noticed. That's almost part of it. There's not very much sitting. What's up with that? And I'll talk about, we're going to add a little bit extra from what's on the schedule, but let me talk about it in a different way. I want to back up. There is a small quotation which I probably should have added to your handouts, which I did not. But I think many of you have it who have studied the precepts, and we'll make sure that we email it to you. It's a bit of a paragraph. It's not super long. It's extremely rich. It's a quotation from one of the first generation Japanese teachers, Koan Roshi, who was associated with San Francisco Zen Center and some of those teachers, but also on his own. He was quite a poet. My teacher, Blanche Hartman, was very fond of him and his teachings. And so I became aware of him early on. In fact, the piece I'm about to read to you, which some of you are familiar with, because you used it in your precepts class, is the only thing that Blanche gave me when I began to study the precepts. That was it, this paragraph. And then she gave me some instructions, but not a lot of content. But it speaks to study. And it speaks to something quite remarkable. So I want to begin as we sort of orient ourselves to our whole retreat. And there's a word that is unusual in it, the word that you would not know, Denko-e. It's a Japanese word, D-E-N-K-O, in English letters, a little dash and an E, Denko-e. And I'm going to tell you what that is, but first I'm just going to read it once, and then we're going to go back, okay?
Could you raise your voice just a tiny bit?
I'll do my best. And keep signaling me.
Okay.
If I go down?
Okay.
The main subject of Denko-e is how to become a transmitter of actual light. Life, light. Practice takes place to shape your whole ability to reflect the light coming through you and to regenerate your system so the light increases its power. Each precept is a mark about hard climbing, maybe climbing down. You don't use the precepts for accomplishing your own personality or fulfilling your dream of your highest image. You don't use the precepts in that way. The precepts are the reflected light world of one precept, which is Buddha's mind itself, which is the presence of Buddha. Zazen is the first formulation of the accomplishment of Buddha existing. The more you sense the rareness and value of your own life, the more you realize that how you use it, how you manifest it, is all your responsibility. We face such a big task. So naturally, such a person sits down for a while. It's not an intended action. It's a natural action. So it's a small paragraph. There's quite a bit, isn't it? In there, isn't it? It's a little bit dense in some places. So I'm going to go back and say a few words. We will have a Jukai ceremony for 4 baby bodhisattvas on Saturday. And so they will be taking the precepts in a formal way. All of them have studied the precepts and had the precepts celebration ceremony already. This is a more formal way, and they will have sewn one of these. And so let me go back and say something about the word Denko A, so you know, because it's in the first sentence. And that's a little aside from the comments on precepts. In the classic sense, Denko A is the name for a concentrated zazen and study retreat. So, for example, I've done a Denko A retreat with Shohaku Okamura. Some of you know him because he translated a lot of Dogen, and maybe you've read some of his books. We studied his book on the Genjo Koan, I think, in one of our retreats. And it's a study retreat. Well, in many ways, this retreat has more study in it than sitting this time. And it comes from, in very classical times, it celebrated a retreat in which students were studying Keizan Zenji's book, the Denko Roku. So there's the Denko part, which usually translated as Record of Transmitting the Light. And what it is Keizan, who was a couple of generations after Dogen, they're thought of as the mother and the father of Soto Zen. And their 2 temples, Eiheiji and Sojiji, alternate as like the Vatican for Soto Zen. One year, one of them is the main, next year, the next one is the main one. They share it. Dogen is thought of the father of Soto Zen, and Keizan is thought of the mother. Very compassionate. But he wrote this book called Record of Transmitting the Light, and it's the story of all the ancestors' awakening stories. How they transmitted the light, how they kept it going, how they kept the lamp going. There were awakening stories. So Kobuchino used the phrase, when he was teaching, some of his retreats were called Gathering of Light Sessions. It was the gathering of light, which I like that. And often in these retreats, multiple teachers would contribute instead of just one main teacher. And in this retreat, I'll have the 4 people who are taking Jukai, these 4, teaching with me most of the time. It's not this first one or the last one, but so we'll be enacting the same form. And that's how we're creating the week. So that's what that term means. Is that clear enough? It's a beautiful, and that's why Koban starts talking about light. And once again, I said he's a poet. It's very poetic and beautiful, isn't it? He says the main subject of Denko E, and when I've got this this quote from Berlange, it was a parentheses, and it said the main subject of, and she put in the precepts, which is what we're studying, what she was having me study, is how to become a transmitter of actual light. Life light. That's interesting because it sounds a little woo-woo, doesn't it? Like you become this new age beacon of light, you know. And he says practice takes place to shape your whole ability to reflect the light coming through you, already coming through you, and to regenerate your system so the light increases its power. We use that old term, enlightenment. So there's this emphasis on something that suddenly becomes visible that wasn't visible before. But the term we use in practice isn't creation meant or something. It doesn't make something. It just turns the light on. And you can notice and see and realize something that wasn't there before. That there is, that light is, enlightenment is already present. It's the basis of your existence. But we don't necessarily notice it, and our practice helps us wake up to it, to realize it, and to express it, manifest it. And that's what you're doing when you sit zazen, by the way. Know it or not, realize it or not, you're enacting and expressing enlightenment. Doesn't much feel that way sometimes, does it? When you're sleepy or tired or in pain or this and that. Practice takes place to shape your whole ability to reflect the light coming through you and to regenerate your system so the light increases its power. So that first part is about light, about the dim code. Okay. And then he makes the shift. He says each precept is a remark about hard climbing, maybe climbing down. I like that. It's not about ascending. It's maybe settling down into who and what you really are. In the second period of zazen, when I said, take care of your breath, take care of your posture, awakening will take care of itself. That's all the Dharma talk. It's everything. Just take care of the existence of your own presence. Because the light of awakening is already and always fully existing. But you can begin to realize it and embody it. And zazen is the way that we begin that. Each precept is a remark about hard climbing. There is a challenge to aligning ourselves with the way of the Buddha. The precepts are not like commandments, do this and then you'll be like a good person. They're descriptions of how an awakened person lives their life. Like if you're awake, you wouldn't be killing people, lying or stealing, or it wouldn't occur to you. That wouldn't be the way you live your life if you were awake, fully awake to what? To what the Buddha realized, which is mutual causality, our vast interdependent nature, and that everything is impermanent, very beautiful and temporary. So the precepts are about hard climbing. I mean, there's effort involved. You don't extend effort, sometimes this realization doesn't manifest. But it's about immanence and embodiment, climbing down, not ascendance or leaving. And so he says, you don't use the precepts for accomplishing your own personality or fulfilling your dream of your highest image. Darn. I was going to be a better person. And that is sometimes what calls us to practice, isn't it? It's like, I got to do something about this life, and there's a way that calls you, and you begin to realize that actually it isn't what's happening over time. And he says, you don't use the precepts in this way. And then he makes some of those complicated statements, which are quite beautiful, though. He says the precepts are the reflective light world of one precept. It's like light going into a prism, and it opens up into all these colors. It's one light, but it has all the spectrum of ethical conduct, all the ways one conducts one's life. But it's one thing. And he says, the precepts are the reflective light world of one precept, which is Buddha's mind itself, which is the presence of Buddha. That's what that light is, that we carry, that we are, that animates us. And then he says, zazen is the first formulation of the accomplishment of Buddha existing. That's a curious one, isn't it? That's right. Zazen is the first formulation. Zazen is what we do first. We sit down. And we take an upright posture, the posture of alignment with awakening, some dignity. That's the first formula, it's the formulation of Buddha existing. Like, I may feel like a very messed up human being, which I often feel. But when I sit Zazen, that idea can be over there, but I'm formulating myself in a way that is in accord with, like, the statue, like Buddha's existing. The first formulation of the accomplishment of Buddha existence. Sometimes it falls. The more you sense the rareness and value of your own life, and I think this is an interesting follow-up. As we began to sit, and we start to get an idea of what this practice might be, you begin to realize the rareness, value of your own life. So you begin to realize that how you use it, how you manifest it, is very much your responsibility. When we chanted the refuges, and we said, we take refuge in Sangha before all being, bringing harmony to everyone free from difference. It doesn't mean that you're not a pain in the ass. It just means you attempt to accord with everyone free from hindrance. It's a big responsibility to take responsibility for your life and for the life of all those around you, because you realize we're not separate. And he says, so we face such a big task, naturally, such a person sits down for a while. It's like a great joke, isn't it? It's like, man, this is a big thing. And then he said, it's not an intended action, it's a natural act. It's something that you naturally do. It's not like you need to do it. It's like sitting down and being silent. When I begin a retreat, almost always, we sit down and we're about to start orientation to get everything settled. And to me, I just want to sit there. Just be with you, be quiet. We don't really need to do anything else, but do. It gets us moving and connected to the teachings, and it helps us with the ways we stumble along. But it's a natural action, just to sit and be with each other. So all in all, I think this is a beautiful way to think about our practice, being a transmitter of light, how it relates to the precept. It's a way to become a way in which that light is actually regenerated and made more powerful by our vows. That it's about settling into our own lives, not trying to get out of them. And we understand our impact on the world by our actions that we'll be talking about. And our particular way this time is like a study retreat. Study quite a bit. Sounds okay so far? You're in the right place? Yeah, up again. Thank you. One of the books I've been reading lately, some of you know, I've been appreciating, is a book called Seeing One Thing Through to the End. And it's the pulling together of teachings from Sojun Mel Weissman of Berkeley Zen Center. And Sojun died a few years ago. And I was fortunate to practice with him quite a bit. And so I wanted to go back and read what had been pulled together after his death. There's a memoir section which he wrote, and then a lot of his teachings. Some of you have read probably the collected teachings from Blanche, Seeds for a Balanced Life. And it's similar to that. And I want to read a small quote from his teachings, which bear on and reflect what I'm trying to communicate about Zazen, is about sometimes the aim that's spoken about in Zen, which is a little problematic, this thing about enlightenment. So these are Sojun's words. He says, when we say, get enlightened, it's not that we actually get something. It means to bring forth light. To let go so that light can shine forth. Enlightenment is an expression of our true nature, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily realize it. Enlightenment is the beginning of our practice. This is the part I want you to underline. In fact, when we invoke the Jukai ceremony on Saturday, the first line includes this statement. In faith that we are Buddha, we enter Buddha's way. Wait a minute, that's the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was the culmination of practice. No. Enlightenment is the beginning of our practice, and here's the way he says it. The fact that we want to practice, or the fact that you're here, the fact that we want to practice means that the enlightenment that is always with you needs to somehow be expressed. What got you to practice is enlightenment that wants to express itself. We usually think of, I want to practice so I will gain enlightenment or see things differently or have some better mind or a clearer heart or just be a nicer person or something. But actually it's the natural wakefulness that brings you to practice. It wants to express itself. And once you do, he says later, he says, but you won't want to stop. Because enlightenment is within our effort, within our practice. So we're not practicing to gain something, we're practicing to express it. And the effort that you engage in sitting zazen, or walking, or doing our service, or taking care of the zendo, or whatever you do, that's the wakeful effort. He says practice brings forth enlightenment, and enlightenment creates practice. Practice is the basis. Enlightenment is its expression and extends everywhere. It's not confined to certain places or activity. This is it. So how many of you, when I'm reading this, and there are many other ways in which he speaks about this in his teaching, it's very encouraging and it really turns things around. It's like you're being drawn to practice because of innate enlightenment. Well, that's even not the right way to say it in a way. And that's what's calling you so it can find its expression. So we stop and take the posture of a Buddha and breathe and begin relaxing all the other commentary that we're using to create this thing we call a self. It's not that anything has to be killed or gotten rid of, but quieting down and settling down, slowing down does seem to make a difference. And so we enact these kinds of activities. One of our ancestors, oh, by the way, if you have a question or a comment, you could ask. You don't have to wait some other time.
I have a brief comment. It's so contrary to what I individually was raised as Catholic.
I'm gonna ask you to do something. If you have a question, say it as if the screen or Ava needs to hear it. Say it that loud, because if you're close, you're talking to me, but say it loud enough that someone over there would hear it.
Thank you. I was just reflecting that it's so different than what I was taught to believe. It's just that I was born with original sin and I needed to basically like do everything I could my whole life to make up for it is my experience of it. Versus like
instead of original enlightenment.
Yeah, I'm like, I wish someone would have told me this a lot sooner.
Right. What's curious is, as a good Southern Baptist boy, I learned the same thing. But then later, I began to look at the scriptures, and it's like, you're made in my image.
I missed that part.
What? No, which is the truth here?
Lynn, could you just state what Denko A is again?
Yes.
The definition.
Yes.
It's not just light, right?
It was the name that was given for a concentrated retreat of zazen and study. And it came out of, originally, that word came from study retreats that were all of them were associated with studying the awakening stories in Keizan's book, the Jinko Roku, which means the record of the transmission of light. So that's where it came from. It's kind of like, I was talking the other day in inquiry about, we have the word in English, Odyssey, but it comes from the Greek Odysseus, because he was, it comes into our language, but it was based on something else. So Denko A is a retreat that was originally about one thing, studying these transmission of a lamp, transmission of a light. And sometimes now it's used, and more generally, as a study practice retreat, no matter what the content. Is that helpful?
Flint, can I ask? Your enlightenment is expressing the light or enlightenment that already exists. Isn't this just turning Buddhism on its head?
I'm not sure it's turning Buddhism on its head. I think it's turning our perception of what Buddhism is on its head.
Okay. I mean, this just feels really radical. I love it.
It is radical.
I love it.
Well, here's the switch if you want, and this gets too complicated to go into a lot, but the philosophical stance and the mind that goes into early Buddhism in northern India had more of that sort of striving for. But when it moved into China and met Taoism and became Chan, and then later Zen, there was a revolution that had to do with the kind of thing that you're starting to feel right now.
Mm-hmm.
This shift.
Thank you.
I just, I remember when I started and people would say, well, you're already Buddha. Well, you're Buddha. You're Buddha. It's like, well, I'm not really Buddha. I don't even know what that means. This really helps to clarify the meaning of that statement.
Yes.
It's very helpful to think of it.
Yeah, and I'll talk about this later too. Within, certainly within the Zen teachings, because those are the ones I'm more familiar with, there's I actually said it earlier when I was talking about the altar. The first Dharma talk I ever heard in a Zen was at Gringo's farm. Rev was Abbot at that time, a long time ago. And I don't remember anything he said. I'm kind of mesmerized and in pain and all kind of things. But I do remember the last thing he said. He paused after he finished the talk, and he just said a question. He said, is it ordinary or is it holy? And he got up and walked out. When we began to realize the non-separation between ordinary and holy, that question is clarified. Is everything ordinary? Of course it is. Just stuff. Just us. Impermanent. Is it all sacred? If we treat it that way. And that's what the precepts remind us to do. Yes.
I hope this isn't off topic, but it's something that has always confused me, or not confused me, but something that attracted me to Buddhism when I was 12 years old was that there was no deity.
Huh?
That that he said himself that he was not a god. There are millions, billions of Buddhists. How many of them regard this as religion with a god versus we who regard it as a practice without a deity?
Well, there even, the whole question of whether it's religion or not, it's not based on the deity issue. But that's another topic.
Okay.
It's more complicated. Yeah, there are people who think of that. Yeah. And there are many ministers in my family. And some of those Southern Baptist ministers, when I was ordained, were quite critical of me because they said, "Oh, now you're worshiping." Da, da. It's like, no, actually, no. And by the way, what I've learned by practicing Zen is to go back and read the Jesus story and all that other stuff that you taught and finally get it, what it was about, instead of what I learned from the church. The church was a problem. The teachings weren't once I went there. It's like, oh, why didn't they teach it to me this way the first time? Saved a lot of therapy. Because of these kinds of things. But there are other people who turned into that because humans like to do that. You remember the joke I told you about Mara and the enlightened person? There's a joke. Mara, who in the Buddhist kind of is like the devil, I mean the tempter, the one who throws you off. You know, so he's hanging out with his minions and they see someone walking down the road and that person is full of light. And they can see, it's like, uh-oh, there's one that's enlightened. What are we going to do? And Mara says, oh, don't worry about it. They'll turn it into a belief. So, Dharma without dogma. That's what you want. Yeah. Practice takes place to shape our whole ability to reflect the light coming through you and to regenerate our system so the light increases its power. So we sit down for a while. One of our ancestors, Wibak Yunmen, who you don't need to know these people, but someone asked him, a student asked him, I think, in such a discussion like this, and this is translated, of course, from Chinese, but the student asked Yunmen, what is reaching the light? What is reaching the light? So the student is saying, okay, I got this thing about light, but I'm searching on. And Yunmen replied, forget the light. Give me the reaching. Forget the light, give me the reaching. Forget the goal. Let's practice. Let's just practice. There's something in that, in reaching, which could be construed as trying to achieve something. But also, there's that sense of what Suzuki Roshi would call an inmost request, the sort of call that we have to follow. So we're going to share a few days of reaching.
I'm so relieved to hear that because I've been struggling with the concept of, an eagerness, a growing eagerness that I'm feeling around this. And then there's a voice in my head that is saying, Julia, calm down. Like, you have to slow it down. You have to and yet I do find myself reaching and I'm not supposed to be grasping it. So I've been having some conflict around this. And like this eagerness is like a bad thing, and it almost feels like a restlessness-ish.
Well, it is restless.
Okay.
The restless is that something's waking up. We feel this especially on the Big Island. The volcano's about to go. You know, there's a little steam or little earthquakes. There's something about to happen because there's something deep moving. We can feel it. And this inmost request, I like that strange way of using English. It's something deep in us, and it's a request that we often don't even know how to articulate. But when it's articulated in the teachings, or when it's exhibited because we meet someone who seems to have something about them that calls us, it's like, what's that?
How do I get it?
Like I told you, like when I chose Blanche as my teacher, you know, there's all these great teachers around that were pretty good. I mean, Ava studied in San Francisco, so she knows a lot of these folks, but real smart people and all that. I'm smart, that's not the deal. But when I saw this woman do service, this old woman do service and bow and use her bowing cloth, and there's a dignity, it's like, what is that? It was something I couldn't understand. It was so compelling, I couldn't turn away from it. Because it called up something in me. And each teacher, of course, has their own way. And every student isn't drawn to every teacher, but if they are, the teacher has called something in them that wanted to be called. That resonance.
Is this also like in Sufism? Would this be the longing for the beloved?
Like Rumi talks about. Yeah, it can be. Sometimes it's very devotional. Some people don't, their practice isn't quite so devotional. They don't feel it that way. But that's one that I resonate with, certainly.
Thank you.
And then you have, there are teachers who are amazing in the way that they call forward awakening in their students. And they themselves may not express it in a very classical way. You know, I'm only thinking of this because Ava's here, you keep reminding me of things. It's like one of the things I loved about her teacher, Darling Koan, is she always had the best manicures. You know, her red nails.
She always had what?
Her manicure, her red nails, and her hair. You know, you expect these, you know, severe nuns, you know, girl. Yeah, red nails. She loved it, you know. So everybody has their way, you know.
Lynn, could I have one more question that I hope applies to other people?
Go right ahead.
Okay. It's a practical matter too. I went through Reiki instruction. It was the school.
I did the level 1.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay, I finished 2, so we'll have to talk about that. But we received the attunement, and I'm set up to offer Reiki. But now I'm frozen. It's like how in that attunement and in the education, how do I do to have the light to pass on to other people? I'm kind of pause. Something hits pause on.
Yeah, this is your Koan. This is the question you're living with.
Yeah.
This is one of those questions that it would be a shame to answer. And that'd be good for you to stay with. I'm not trying to avoid it. It's a really good question.
Okay, thank you.
You know, we're all trying at times to do our best, I think. I certainly am, because I get invited to be in this seat, so do your best to articulate what's like glimmering right on the edge of your understanding. It's not straight on. There's something, and something we need to express, and something we need to share. So these awakening stories from the Denko-roku, from the transmission of the light, and some of the others, we use them as vehicles to support the teaching. We're going to use them in the next few days in this way. I think that in your handouts, you were given, you don't have to look at these, but if you want to, you can. There's a page that has the name of the retreat on it, the Koan of your life, living encounters and awakening today. Yeah, on the right side, I think, of your, and there are two versions of these four phrases. There's the classical one and the one that CJ gave, which I love. And these are classical descriptions of what Zen is. The first one, the first translation, it's a special transmission outside the scriptures, not depending on words and letters, directly pointing to the mind, seeing in one's nature and attaining Buddhahood. That's kind of a classic one you see a lot that way. In other words, Zen practice is something that we engage together, and there's a transmission that happens that isn't just through the words. It's outside of the scriptures, not dependent on words and letters. We use words, of course, because it's a direct pointing to the heart and mind, seeing into one's nature that light, and realizing one's the classic, the translation that Christopher gave us, read it. Your version.
A distinct transmission beyond collected teachings, not established on words and language, directly pointing to the heart, mind, encounter original nature, and enact awake awareness. Be Buddha.
Pardon me. Say something about the difference.
For me, distinct transmission helps me ease up on the, oh, it's got to be special. I've got to be special. I have to get to here to be special or to be viewed as special. Helps me soften that and let go of the specialness just a little bit. It would be important. So it's something distinct. Not established on words and language. Another way of saying not depending on that. But it's not
the dogma.
It's not the dogma. It's not resting on anything that's in our words or language. Even the words and language can be used. It's not in that. Kind of free of that. We're beyond that. Still the direct pointing. And in the classic version, mind really does mean in that conception of the culture that this grew out of heart mind. But in our culture, we think of them as different and separate. So one thing, heart and mind.
In the original, directly pointing to the mind, it sounds like intellect.
Seeing into one's true nature, I have here encounter, because seeing is helpful, but it can also be through hearing, it can be through feeling, it can be through sensing. And there's a relational aspect to it. It's a meeting, it's a coming into contact, which is also another way of like, not really separate. We can still perceive it, but it's not me seeing it over there, but there's a encounter. True nature or original nature. And then this, getting after the same thing of like, ease up, buddy. It's not out there. I don't have to grasp to get some other thing that I have to attain. But
where do you put that energy then? Where do you put that effort? That's into enact. Awake awareness. There is effort required, but it's not about effort to attain. It's the effort of enactment. That's why you put your energy into sitting zazen. That's like waiting around for enlightenment to come. You're enacting it. That's your job to hold it. Be Buddha. That last line really changes the way this is understood, I think. I took over. What do you want to say?
That's already too much.
Encounter.
Is this, I kind of lost this. Chris, is this your reimagining of the first?
Yeah, exactly. And not just from me, but like, I've seen it this way, I've seen it this way. Some people have said
We
this.
pulled it together.
Pulled it together and then kind of put our own spin on it for us.
And then, oh, Grace,
Neve has a
question up there?
comment. One moment.
Hi. Can you hear me?
1 second, Jeanette.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Sound is muted.
All right,
Oh,
go.
Good.
oh, how about now? Can you hear me?
Yep, good to go.
Oh, it's so lovely to be with you all.
Good to see.
I also did Reiki 1 and 2. And what you both of you have been saying reminds me of a time of right after 9/11 when the Franciscan monk Thomas Keating, who started contemplative Christianity, which is basically meditation, he got together with Sheikh Din Muhammad Abdullah al-Daimi, and they went around and gave talks together. And I went to one, and one would stand up and talk, and the other would sit, and then they'd switch off. And they were complete opposites. I mean, one of them had spent his life in a monastery in silence, and the other one had a vineyard and children and grandchildren, and but what I was experiencing was that because it was expected, they were saying things, using words, but actually they were channeling directly from their heart to my heart. There was something that was the real thing that was happening. And the words were just it's like dressing, because it was expected. I would just wonder, I've been feeling lately like the practice or the path is moving through me. It's awakening in me, and I'm observing it. Like it's expressing itself and surprising me. And I'm observing this response of fear and some kind of like resistance. And I just wonder if you could speak to that in any way.
Sure. Using the language that we sometimes use and kind of understanding these dynamics, we sometimes use parse language like internal family systems you're familiar with. There are certain parts of you as you open, as more self begins to express itself, which get freaked out. What's going to happen to me? I'm saying it a little in a facile kind of way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's natural. The truth will set you free, but first it'll make you miserable.
I do feel myself clinging to habits, for example, avoidance habits. And, I don't know if I'm noticing more that it's clinging or if it's clinging more, but it's more apparent to me.
Yeah. So those are the moments when, if you sit quietly and turn toward the ones who cling. Oh, I see you. I see that you're clinging. And if you are open-hearted towards those parts, rather than judgmental or trying to get them to change, and they can tell that you're really interested, they'll tell you their stories that you know. Without any intention to try to make them change, just be intimate with the clinging.
With the what?
the clinging. You know those
Oh,
Zen's things where it says be one with the blah, blah, whatever it is? That's what they're talking about. What if you turn toward with an open heart and mind, curiosity, to understand the clinging instead of trying to fix it?
mm,
And then if awakening is what's natural, that's what's going to begin to move in the system. And we don't know how it's going to go. I was talking to one old Tibetan guy one time, and he was actually from Tibet. He wasn't an American who had studied. And he was trying to give me an analogy. He said, oh, it's like, you know, we have to feed the yak. We have hay bales. We take the bale out and you cut the wire and it just falls over.
mm, mm,
Now, sometimes we need another to help us with some of those parts that get freaked out or they cling really tightly. And we need another person to help us, to guide us, to even just witness us and facilitate. So that's, and, you know, you and I have done that, and other people have done that. So that's quite useful because, in fact, in the description that these guys wrote for this retreat, I think it's on your list. It says, the path to wakefulness and liberation is relational.
mm.
Relating to oneself, with one another, with teachers, and with the objects, circumstances, and actions of everyday life. We're just touching it in some way now. Let's see something. What's happening?
I this I have a like a deeply lonely part
Lonely?
and lonely, yeah.
Yeah.
And um it's very moving to think that it doesn't have to be alone anymore.
Yes. It could rest into that hand. And the hand can meet loneliness. In fact, even though you're online, you can feel your hand there, and you can probably see it if you look at a reflection. You can see my hand sort of echoing yours in a certain way. Imagine that my hand is like this.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can do it with the other hand if you want to feel it. That lonely one.
That it feels like that's what there never was, that other hand.
Yeah.
Mm, mm,
We offer, we receive, and then enact. This is awake awareness. That's the enactment of awake awareness. Is and the parts that cling and get kind of scared, how are they doing right now?
they feel soothed,
They feel, say again?
soothed.
Oh. As these parts of us begin to see possibility, maybe it's possible to not be alone. Maybe it's possible that in the Ehe Kosu Hatsugonmon, Dogen talks about something we don't talk about very much sometimes, and I wanted it for this reason. He talks about faith. It's easy to slide into that stuff Marla was concerned about. You know? What is faith? No, it's based in true nature, not in something else or in some dogmatic belief system. This is possible. And when you begin to feel it and know it to be possible, that's beyond words and letters. That's the
Yeah.
words and language. What's wanted now? Anything else?
No, thank you so much.
Of course. And one of the things that's happened is because of our interaction in public, now everyone else has started to feel some of this. Right? Because it's catching. This is what Sangha is for. Because we all have the yearning, the longing for these kinds of moments of freedom.
And can I piggyback on Jeanette? So what I've been working with, and this is sort of shifting it around for me, and also what Jeanette talked about is sort of shifting it, is that in my life, everything that every practice that I've had before Zen was to get good at something. And this is a practice that is not based on that. And it leaves me still with that idea. And I know that it's not fulfillable.
You don't have to get rid of it.
Well, that's what I just learned.
Even the one that said she had to get rid of stuff, you don't have to get rid of that.
Yeah, I just figured that out.
Well, okay. Is it okay if I take it one step further?
Of course.
Okay. We hear this thing all the time that everything has Buddha nature, or everything is the nature of Buddha. So that part that feels like it needs to get rid of something, in its essence is Buddha. So how that part is open or release of its burdens, what's the gift in there? In its extreme position, it's I gotta get rid of something, I gotta get fixed. Something be touched.
I think that everything that every aspect of the practice that teaches me something new brings shame.
It's like Jeanette was saying, there's the part in her that was grasping. This is a shame.
Shame for whatever it was that some light was shed on that. Kind of like what you were saying, Emily, about the Catholic part. It's either or. There's no in between. There's no shades of gray. And I learned that really well. So this is, everything's accepted, and that's
Hard to believe.
that's big news.
Yeah. Because if I've got to get rid of something, I've got to get rid of something. If that's softened and it's no longer what it used to be, that's the essence of renunciation. Just let it go. And there's another piece to it that, like Jeanette was enacting with her body, there's another piece to feel that do you want to experiment with it for a second? Okay. And I don't know how to do this exactly. I think you can see it on my page. Yeah. Let's go over here because they can probably see it. And can you guys see us if we're right here? Okay. Okay. So what's the basic posture of shame? You know that, like, I can't, right? And you think somebody's doing this or something.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And so take the posture. Remember, we just enact these things, okay? And is it okay if I touch you? Okay. So I'm not moving you, right? No, this is touching you. And you do whatever you want. Your head comes up a little bit. So you're able to look now. How's that?
Pepper.
And so instead of you covering and you doing that, do this. Keep breathing. What happened?
Felt well connected. Yeah, felt well. Welcomed.
Isn't it? For someone else to do it?
Yes.
Unexpected.
Completely.
But now you're laughing. Let's figure it all out. Just let your body have it. Okay? Yeah, that's enough for us. Exactly. Otherwise, we start thinking about it.
I know. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Now, these things are quite touching, you know, and personal, of course. And yet the enactment that we utilize to help us enter this field in which these things happen are actually the forms. We bow to each other. We walk together, we sit together, we attempt to do things that connect us. That's the beginning. This is a very philosophical sounding quote. We've been so tender, but listen to this. It's from Peter Herschot, you know, one of my favorites. He says, with utterly refreshing candor, but there's something utterly refreshing about someone trying to God Zen calls us to celebrate the enlightening possibilities given right here, right now. It offers no substantial rewards and no special experiential treasures. Only doesn't offer that, but what it does offer, and this is going to be some fancy words here, the means of realizing. What it offers is the means of realizing unwavering confidence for entering into deeper and more liberating intimacy with our immediate surrender. Now we just were doing? It doesn't give us stuff. We start having unwavering confidence. Hey, this is possible. I said, did you know? For entering into ever deeper and more liberating intimacy with our immediate surrender. And so he goes on to say, in this sense, Chan or Zen awakening is not a private affair, but an irreducible social process. It's not something you do alone. It only happens between. And he says, whether we're standing, sitting, walking, or lying down, Chan or Zen means realizing, and here's his fancy words again, but realizing horizonless and responsive presence with and for another. begin to realize that there's no end, there's no edge to the responsive presence we can begin to have with ourselves and with everyone else. And what is it? It's 11:30 in the morning on the first day of retreat.
Done it again.
What happened? I think it's what he's pointing to. That if you have some confidence in the practice, and you have some confidence in each other and the teachings and the teacher or whatever, it's more than just me, that things are possible like now, not later, not some other time.
Not when all of the conditions are correct.
Within all the conditions, even when they're messed up. Because it's always there. And we look, it's like during inquiry sometimes, those of you that have been with me during that, someone will come and they'll be talking, and I'm just sitting there, and a lot of people will say to me later, why'd you just sit there? I didn't do anything. You were waiting. I'm waiting for the entry. Waiting for the little thread that will touch this. So, this tradition has been handed down. Those little stories and little scraps of history and brief encounters, those are the things that get written down. And I think they serve just like these moments. When you read the stories of teachers and students together in the old Koans, someone wrote down what they did. And it's in a different culture, and some of it seems weird. But what we just did, that's what they're writing down. Something that happened. And when someone went, oh. And these stories are encouraging. Like evidence that this kind of relational awakening, this way of living is possible. That's part of why you come back, right? You gotta get reminded, And so this is the distinct and special transmission in those 4 lines. It's like this. And the enlightened stories from the Dinkoroku and from others and all the Koan collections are little poetic distillations that reveal and then can kind of offer back to us these moments of liberating intimacy. And then over the centuries, they got them down, use them again. As skillful means to kind of tease out, tease forward these parts, the heart of mind. Because that's where you begin to loosen your grip on habitual hindrances. I think you actually said that, didn't you? You can feel, and we began to just soften our grip a little bit. That's what you literally opened your hand and softened your grip on our hindrances. And engaging the stories helps us meet life with a little more free-flowing immediacy, which is strange because we do these forms. It seems like these things bridges sometimes are like enclosing, but they're not so that we tear down. They're so that we release all of the ways that we're enacting life in habitual, self-centered ways. We make it very, very simple. We just sit. And then everything else starts to show itself. All the habit patterns. Oh, but I'd rather, but I wish now I feel. All the comments, all the habit patterns are showing itself. Then we come to discover where we're stuck. And the places we notice that we're stuck and the places that come up are precisely the path which we just saw. We took the place that felt where the pain was, the difficulty was, both cases, Jeff, Rosemary, both. It's like, oh, that was the opening. That's what we're looking for. That's not the problem. That's the past. That's why we talk about the enactment of this kind of wakefulness being improvisational virtuosity. Being to be able to improvise in a wonderful way with whatever comes up. Here's Hirschach again. In the practice tradition of Koan, the hallmark of excellence is not the ability to transmit a fixed canon or act according to set customs and principles. It is unprecedented and skilled immediacy or improvisational genius. He has a certain way it works, but no, it's the ability to be the jazz ensemble of life. To tune up your instrument and continue to tune it up, continue to play the scales of everyday practice so that you become so familiar with the instrument. And when someone else plays a chord, you respond to something that starts to feel like the music of life instead of just chaos.
So Flint, with these four, the Zen path, the fourfold phrase, directly pointing to the mind. So for me, in my practice lately is based on, you are not your mind. So I say hello to my mind, and I say, you are not your mind. And so I'm a little
That's a good question.
confused with
Yes,
that.
yes. Yeah. We get very enchanted by the contents of our awareness. In other words, what we call our mind, the stuff we think about. We have a thought about this, an idea about that, a preference, a fear, all that stuff that happens. We think that is our mind. All the contents of nature. The word they're using for heart mind isn't that. It's the space at which all of that happens. It's the vast boundlessness that we're chanting about in our sutra. Which of course doesn't form, but we say you are not your mind, but what they're saying is you are not all the contents of your consciousness. You're not, all the metaphors that are used. You are the sky. In fact, in Sochen, in the Tibetan tradition, they use this phrase a lot. Suzanne's practiced a lot of Sochen. It's called the sky-like nature of mind. It's vast and inconceivably broad and endless. Now, clouds go through it, and storms, and airplanes, and birds. Those are the contents. But those things don't change the sky. The sky remains as vast and open as it always was. You are not the bird in the airplane in the storm. You are the sky. You are not your mind. You're not your contents of your mind. Is that helpful?
You are not your thoughts.
They're not your thoughts. And yet you have thoughts, of course. And
You
they will always
you are
continue.
your heart mind, you're just not your
Yeah.
thoughts.
And they'll always continue. And a lot of people think, oh, I need to change and stop my thoughts and control my mind. And then that's a fight you're going to do all your life. That'll never stop. What we wake up to is that, Suzuki Roshi said it this way: big mind is finally realizing you'll always live with a small mind. Because it's the larger view. And it includes everything. Nothing's gotten rid of includes everything. Then there's no shame. And you're not alone. Maybe we should say a couple of things about the service. Because it's, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but having spoken about what we've spoken about so far and have a little bit of experience we've had, I want you to see how the service is an expression of what we're talking about. When we finish sitting and we do the robe chant, the first thing we say is vast is the robe of liberation. It's like, oh, liberation is what's vast, not suffering. That's what we're resting. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. It doesn't take any particular form, but it can take any form. It's free, it's unencumbered, a formless field of goodness. Ground of being is unconditioned good. And then the next, wearing the universal teaching. Wearing it in your body, getting it in your body. Wearing the universal teaching, sitting, walking. I realize the one true nature, not words and letters, thoughts and things. Thus harmonizing all being. Doesn't say all beings, all being is harmonized by wearing those teachings of boundlessness. So we remind ourselves of that when we finish our sitting. Oh, that's what we've been doing. We've been sitting in the vast robe of liberation. And then we're going to put on the robe, which is a symbol of that of Buddha's body. And we're going to go to the Buddha Hall. What's the first thing we do? Besides opening the Zen book, is repentance, right? It's like, oh, all that ancient tangled karma from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. Okay, I stand up in the middle of my life and I admit, yep, this is me. It doesn't say I'm a terrible sinner. It says this is me. And I'm a result of all the karma that came before, created this. From beginningless greed, hate, and delusion means that's what it comes with the deal. It's not your fault. Beginningless. But born through body, speech, and mind, you got to take responsibility for this one. So, okay, I'll admit it. This is me. And then we chant it with the different pronouns. All our occasions. Take it from beginningless. Now we avow, because it's relational. And then the universal one, all the ancient tangled karma. All being now fully avows. Like, oh, this is it. This is this whole interdependent thing. And so now that we've situated ourselves there, what do we do next? Like, oh, okay, I'm going to look at all this. I'm going to accept all this. I'm going to work with all of this. So what do I have to do? And if I'm not going to use my usual ways of body, speech, and mind, I'm not going to use my usual neurotic craziness here. What am I going to use? Well, I'll take refuge. Oh, I'm going to use Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, teacher, teachings, community. My own true nature, Buddha, the way things actually move, Dharma, interconnectedness of all beings. So we take refuge, we come home, say, oh, this is where, well, this is where the work happens, this is where the practice happens. And when we chant it, we also chant it, I take refuge, we take refuge, and now refuge is taken. That's why we changed the pronouns. Now, if I go to a usual kind of place, and it's I all the time, that seems quite right. You know, it's not, I'm not trying to be critical, it's just, there's something about taking responsibility, including sharing responsibility to the whole world. That makes it quite helpful.
Did you change it from twisted to tangled for a specific reason?
Was that?
It used to be twisted, now it's tangled.
Yeah, Tag doesn't like tangled, she likes twisted. But I like tangled. Preferences. I tell you why, because twisted sounded more like sin and something, but everything's tangled up. And
That's more
so
like
I
rooted.
preferred that translation as a way to express what I thought it was expressing. And so if we start with all vast is the road of liberation, that's like starting with original enlightenment. We start with that, and then we are willing to confess that we're a human, that we're conditioned phenomena, and we come back to what we can work with, and the next thing we do is we chant hymn to perfection of wisdom, right? And this one I really like, because this is basically saying we're honoring the mother of all the Buddhas. And it's just great, homage to the perfection of wisdom, the lovely, the holy, the perfection of wisdom gives light, unstained. The entire world cannot stop that light. Go back to that. She is a source of light. She, in you, is the source of light. And from everywhere in the triple world, above, below, and all around, past, present, future, she removes darkness. Because once the light starts coming on, most excellent of her works, she brings lights that all fear and distress may be forsaken and disperses the gloom and darkness of illusion. I love that line. In fact, she herself is an organ division. She is the seeing. That's what wakes up the seeing. Clear knowledge of what the Dharmas express themselves. She doesn't stray away from that because that's the only way she sees the perfection of wisdom of the Buddha sets the motion of the will of Dharma.
The ladder, please.
What's that?
Ladder.
Louder, okay. At the last line, the perfection of wisdom of the Buddhas, where's that clear seeing and understanding, sets in motion the wheel of Dharma. When we practice, we're keeping Dharma moving. It's our responsibility. Without our practice, I mean, things continue, but our practice keeps it alive. Like every mother, every woman, it's necessary. It's the womb of all beings. So there's a lot that can be said about this. It's quite beautiful, I think. And after that, then we have the Heart Sutra. And it starts with Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Wait a minute, this is like the wisdom thing, but it starts with the Bodhisattva of compassion. Avalokiteshvara moves in the deep course of realizing wisdom beyond wisdom, sees it, and turns to Shariputra, who's the one who has all the teachings of the Buddha. So you think Shariputra would be the one who has all the stuff, who would teach you? But no, it's Avalokiteshvara showing Shariputra how to practice. True practice. Talking about that all of this form is just the manifestation of boundlessness. How do you understand boundlessness? By looking at form. What's holy? What's ordinary? And then I'm not going to do a whole thing on the Heart Sutra. It's quite a bit there, but it's basically saying none of the things that we normally think are our mind are it. No eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no sound, no smell, no taste. Right? You can't capture it in one thing. This vastness. And so the mantra at the end, gate gate, paragate, it means beyond, beyond, even beyond, beyond, beyond that even. Woo! Nobody's welcome. It's like going beyond it all. All the things that we think limit, because whatever we think can't be it because it's limited, because it's a conditioned thought. And so once we're done with that, we're like, okay, let's take a moment. May we awaken Buddha's compassion and luminous pure wisdom. It's like, okay, since we chanted that stuff, let's thank all the people who brought it to us. We have that dedication to the ancestors. All Buddhas throughout space and time. All Bodhisattvas, and then we chant one more thing. And again, I don't want to spend too much time with it, but Dogen says, we vow with all beings. This is his personal vow. He doesn't say, I vow. We vow with all beings. Is there any other way? Because we're all intimately tangled and interlaced, then our vow is going to extend to all beings. From this life on throughout countless lives. From beginningless breathing and illusion. We vow to hear the true Dharma, and upon hearing it, no doubt will arise in us. Nor will we lack in faith on a good day. And upon meeting it, that's different with each other. We shall renounce worldly affairs and maintain the Buddha Dharma. That sounds a little extreme if you think about what it means, but it basically says not get too tangled up by it every day and maintain a practice. And then in doing so, the great earth and all living beings together will attain the Buddha way. That's a reference to when the Buddha woke up and said, now all beings will awaken. Everything wakes up at once. And then he goes on and says, although we do have all this past twisted karma, there's something to do about it. And we ask all the Buddhists to help us. May they share their compassion. And then, one of my favorites, Buddhas and ancestors of old. Read now.
As are we.
Right there. Here's somebody else.
Buddhas and ancestors of old were as we. We in the future
Shall be Buddhas and
and ancestors, revering Buddhas and ancestors. We are one Buddha and one ancestor, awakening Bodhi mind. We are one Bodhi mind.
That's what we've been talking about. That's amazing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The Buddhas and ancestors in the past, the ones who, they're like just like us. And we're just like them.
Well, that is, I thought, okay.
Okay, now you hear?
Sorry. There's a bad echo. They're having a hard time.
Oh, okay. So now we have one Buddha and one ancestor echoing through Zoom. We're not connected again.
We'll try to troubleshoot it for the next Dharma talk.
And it says, because they attain their compassion, their compassion to us freely without limit, we are able to attain Buddhahood and let go of the attainment, let go of the attainment, let go of we realize it's not an attainment. Once we realize it, the realization itself lets go of the attainment because we realize it wasn't attained, we just realized. And then the quote from Chan Master Lung Ya, do that one.
Those who in past lives were not enlightened will now be enlightened.
That's you.
In this life, save the body, which is the fruit of many lives. Before Buddhas were enlightened, they were the same as we. Enlightened people of today are exactly as those of old.
Oh, just a reiteration. And then he goes on and talks about some more things. But I love that last line. This is the pure and simple color of true practice. The true mind of faith, the true body of faith. And then we dedicate at the end. There's more dedication there, which is beautiful. You know, people will say to me, what did those people do? The stories we read, what did those people do? And I say they do what you're doing right now. Not something kind of like what you're doing, they did exactly what you're doing. Sitting, walking, being together, studying. Yeah, it may look different culturally and all that stuff, but practice, practice. They did what you're doing. But then the next question I get is, yeah, but they were special. They were not like me. And that's the most painful one. But no, they were born. They had a body. They had a messed up family. They had war and turbulence and all kinds of things that happened. They got sick. They ended up on exactly the same stuff that everyone works with, doing exactly the same practices. That's what we're doing. There isn't any difference.
Well, and what's beautiful is because they made the effort to do the transmission of light, we get to do it too, and then
Yes.
we get to do it, pay it forward, so to speak, for
Yes.
1,000 million kalpas.
And that's why we're Buddha's ancestors.
Yeah.
Yep. That appreciation.
I'm grateful.
It's deep. Let's see if anything else before we can. So I've chosen 4 stories, which these 4 are going to help you with in future Dharma talks. And so we'll see what they're like. Not them. Because when we encounter these old stories, we encounter things that seem like impossible questions. And so it's like setting out on a journey, kind of a path, but it's a really unusual one. It's not like what we're used to. And it doesn't depend on some conventional destination, which is what we've been talking about. I would say that these stories open a path that leads us to joy and freedom. But it doesn't encourage striving or improving. And most of us think that striving and improving is going to get us the joy and the happiness. Instead, it's a path of unmasking. Taking the mask off what appears. And tossing our expectations overboard. And like slowly taking happiness apart. The way we normally construct it. And generally, the process of subverting unhappiness. It's indirect and it's not based on plan, because a plan can't really take you beyond what you can imagine. The plan that you construct for your perfection, a plan can't take you beyond what you can imagine, and these practices take us beyond what you can imagine. In these old stories, all of them imply some kind of profound change of heart. That's what we touched on today. The kind of change of heart that makes the world seem like a different place. It does, doesn't it? Like everything's look different. A world where the mind is a lot more free. And there's joy and kindness underlying everything. And one of the biggest surprises inside the koans is, well, especially their unpredictability. It's very unpredictable, but you don't get chaos. You find beauty. Find beauty. And there are the approach that the old teachers used, and I took these from Joan Sutherland. I like her teachings quite a bit. She She said the old teachers, they trusted doubt. So the doubt that's usually seen as a problem in religion was appreciated as a strength. They treated all questions as relevant, no matter the content. It's like an inquiry. A question's a place to start, and any question was treated as if it were about enlightenment, even though the students were. And third, rather than offering kind advice or clear instructions at the kind we want, they responded to the student as if they were capable of coming to a complete understanding at that very moment of their own. One last quote from John Tarrant, who's a contemporary of Joan Sullivan Sush. He's a wonderful Koan teacher. He says, koans are not intended to prescribe a particular kind of happiness or right way to live. They don't teach you to assemble or make something that didn't exist before. Many psychological and spiritual approaches, and a lot of us are trained in this, they're useful, but many psychological and spiritual approaches rely on a kind of an engineering metaphor. Hope to make your mind more predictable and controllable, right? Like, okay, I get it, fine. Koans go the other way. They encourage you to make an ally of the unpredictability of the mind and to approach your life more like it's a work of art. The surprise they offer is the one that art offers. Inside unpredictability, you find not chaos but beauty. Koans light up a life that may have been dormant in you. They light up the life that was dormant, rise the light. And they hold out the possibility of transformation, even if you're trying to address unclear or apparently insoluble problems. And then he echoes something that we just talked about. He says, today is not so different from the way it was in China. People are called on to survive terror attacks and random mayhem. Hello. In our own country. And even the most domestic life has its quota of desperation and insoluble problems, and its requirements for unusual kindness. Today, people can find koans as helpful as they did long ago. So people think of them, as these perplexing or weird paradoxes, but they're a way to show that you can depend on creativity and like moving outside the box. Sort of show. And they encourage doubt and curiosity. They rely on uncertainty. They undermine all of your reasons and explanations. So this is the direction we're going to go. They also kind of help you see your life as funny instead of tragic. And they will change who you think you are. Not my mind. All this other stuff too. And they will, but this requires a lot of courage. Because like Genev said, things come up, or we meet shame, which is, word. And basically what they do is uncover kindness in life. So that's the direction we're going to go. So as we stop here, there's a poem by Hafiz that's in your all the hemispheres. We may come back to it. I just want to read it before we go because I think it's beautiful. It's in the on the right side, back to the back, it's just one page, all hemispheres. And notice how this echoes all the things we talked about so far in this long. Leave the familiar for a while. Let your senses and bodies stretch out like a welcome season onto the meadows and shores and hills. Open up to the roof. Make a new watermark on your excitement and love. Like a blooming night flower, bestow your vital fragrance of happiness and giving upon our intimate assembly. Change rooms in your mind for a day. All the hemispheres in existence lie beside an equator in your heart. Greet yourself in your 1,000 other forms as you mount the hidden tide and travel back home. All the hemispheres in heaven are sitting around a fire chatting while stitching themselves together in the great circle inside of you. So take this with you. That's something, isn't it? And it's a beautiful expression of all the things we've already been talking about. And I believe that it's time for us to take our lunch break.
Yeah.
Chris has got something for us before we go to lunch.
Before that, wait. May our intention permeate equally.
Oh yeah, we have the thing that we do at the end. What page is it?
It's just a solo chant. It'll take one line,
Okay.
so nobody else has to do anything. I want to finish formally.
Please.
May our intention permeate equally every being in place with the true merit of Buddha's way.
Would you please just turn to the very last page, page 62 of your chant book, and we'll read the very top short meal verse together.
Why don't you stand out so you can sit right.
We revere the
Living brothers and give thanks for this food, the work of many people, and the transformation of other forms of life.
We'll see you back here at 125.
Hi.